What's up, Data Transformers? This is Balaji, and welcome to Data Career Transformations, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their careers. Today, we're speaking to a data engineer who went from COBOL to customer support, and now data engineering. He builds data pipelines enabling business partners to contribute directly to DBT projects via DBT Mesh. He's held roles in tech support, software dev, data governance, and 15 years as a business systems analyst, supporting enterprise business intelligence, API services, core applications, you name it, he's done it. He even contributed to the DBT project evaluator repo last year. But here's what you don't know about him. He loves watching Star Wars shows, Andor, Mandalorian. He loves watching Marvel TV shows, Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage. He's raising two super kids, watch this. Both have black belts in karate. One is an esport prodigy. The other is an EGOT prodigy. Emmy, Golden Globe, Oscar, Tony. I'm talking about acting, singing, dancing, performing on every level. He even loves cooking and baking for his family. But we're going to have to talk about the custard tart devour from Southern California. The lead data analytics engineer at Mercury Insurance. Please help me welcome the Wolverine of workflows, Brad Cronkrite. What up, Brad? It is a thrill to have you here, my friend. Long time coming. Thank you for making this happen. Tell us a little bit about these two amazing kids that you're raising. You guys are like the Incredibles over there.
Yeah, they keep us very busy. When I've got a 14-year-old, just turned 14, and a 17-year-old. And at about 6 years old, we got them each into karate, and took about 6-7 years to get through, but they went through all the ranks to get up to black belt, tested, got their black belts. My youngest then decided doing dance and performing and theater and everything at the same time was too much. So she set aside karate to focus more on that. But my oldest continued and is now going, up through like next levels within the black belt ranks. So yeah, they keep us busy with all that. School's ending here in a couple of weeks. So for the summer, busy summer coming up too.
It's very, very impressive. Kudos to the kids. We always love to celebrate what the young folks are doing. Speaking of young and young at heart, y'all know I have to nerd out on this. I have a fellow Marvel Comics fan on the show today, so you guys are going to have to indulge me. All right, favorite Marvel comic book growing up?
The X-Men was my lead book, and there are several of them at the time. So reading all of those, that was definitely my best ones. Yeah.
Classic. You mentioned that Wolverine is your favorite character. Wolverine can be a bit of a polarizing figure. Why Wolverine in particular?
I think it's not so much the anti-hero nature, which he kind of is, he's kind of a jerk. He's the mean guy, but I think just that he can really get through anything, it basically invulnerable. That's key, because if you're him, you can get through whatever you need to. So yeah, I think that's really what drew me there.
We're all about the invulnerable pipelines and workflows here at Mercury Insurance. All right, good stuff. Yeah. So Brad, before we get into the speeds and feeds, the magical stuff that you're doing at Mercury Insurance, I want to know your origin story. I mean, we are comic book fans after all. Yeah. So it was a dark and stormy night. You were in the lab mixing chemicals. There was a thunderstorm. How did you end up in data?
Yeah. So I first got to work on a database when I was a developer many years ago. And in those days, we managed everything ourselves. We didn't have DBAs to do that. It was on a mainframe. So, working on a system from end to end, like I get to design the screens that the user inputs the data, and then handling the code that handles that data, and then putting that in the database. That was all part of the process from early on. And I really liked being able to do that. So this was on our mainframe, database. And then once I left development to go into business systems analyst work, I didn't really get to work with databases again for like another 5 years or so. And then I was assigned to a project where we were taking vendor data, transforming it, storing it in a database, serving it up with an API. And then from that project, I got exposure to a Microsoft SQL database, and it just clicked for me. Like, oh, this is great. I really like being able to get in here and look at what we're doing. Wow. So I bought a book to teach myself SQL and basically never looked back. Yeah. After that, I spent, a lot of years working on teams dealing with data, unstructured, semi-structured, structured data. 5 years on our enterprise business business intelligence team, which was obviously all about data, the data warehouse, the data lake, and did that for a while. And then shifted over to our work as our data governance manager for a couple of years, but never lost that love of data. And with the experience and knowledge I had, some of the relationships working with other people at the company, I was still often getting requests to write queries or help explain and understand like a data source, some of which I had helped build initially. So I had that subject matter knowledge. And I just never let go of that. I always encourage people, hey, if you have something you need a query, you need me to help you, like send that work to me because I really enjoyed it. And then my leader one day, we're talking in our one-on-one and asks me, are you content with this role? What else do you want to do? And I said, if I could just write SQL queries all day, I'll be happy with that. And so when the company brought on DBT, we purchased some instructor-led training. He offered me a seat in that, and I jumped at it, fell in love with DBT, honestly, during those couple of weeks. Wow. And then we started working on what's the transition look like for me to get from data governance management over to data analytics engineering, being an individual contributor, which is basically my dream there. Transition took a little while. We had hit some road bumps, but in the end, I started doing this full time, and that's now my origin and up to where I'm at today.
See, this is why they call the man the Wolverine of workflows. You went from data governance manager, like, mama, we made it. Like, this is a cushy gig, to being an individual contributor and getting your hands dirty with regular SQL queries. That's a fascinating trajectory. Did you have any sort of imposter syndrome or doubts, or did you just sort of jump in with both feet?
Yeah, I mean, been doing this a long time, working professionally for a while, and that imposter syndrome never goes away. I mean, at least for me, I think that's the case for most people. You get into a new role and it's like, okay, I have some knowledge, but do I have enough? Where are my peers, my coworkers, my new coworkers? Where are they at? How am I going to measure up? How am I going to compare? Oh, I made a mistake. Am I going back to the role I was in because you're not good enough? Like those kind of thoughts, I think, plague most people. And right. you do the work and you look at the results, and hopefully you have supportive leadership that helps you realize it's okay to be imperfect and make mistakes, because nobody's perfect and we all make mistakes, and you work through it. And so I think it never goes away, but it's okay to recognize that and then just work through it and not just let it paralyze you into never trying something new. Because if I did that, I'd still be, answering the phones in tech support like I was when I first started.
Let your kids read comic books, people. This is this is what's going to teach them to make bold moves like what Brad is talking about here. Brad, I'd love for you to orient me a little bit in the insurance industry. So Mercury Insurance Company for 25 or so years. For those who are uninitiated, what are some of the data needs and data challenges within the insurance industry?
Insurance is all about data. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a data product, because you have to be able to sell this coverage at the right price. And you don't know exactly what the right price is, because the right price is going to depend on how much you have to pay out in losses and how much you pay in expenses for the company to work it. So data is paramount. It's foundational. It's the beginning of everything. There's information that our customers give us. When you come in and you want to get a policy, we take down your info, who's in your household, what cars do you have, or are we insuring your house, and those kind of things. And then we rely on a lot of external vendor data. So rather than having the customer tell us, okay, what was your last policy? What were your limits on that policy? What cars were on there? Who was on there? When did you have? And then do that for the last 5 years. We have services to get that information because it all gets contributed. So there's data coming in from 100 different directions. And that's just in like, let's get a person in the door and get them a rate so you can buy a policy. And then beyond that, there's everything you do to service the policies. There's claims. The recent wildfires in California that were devastating in the Palisades and the Eaton area, it was so critical to have data on that, because we need to know where our customers, who has a policy that lives in those areas that we insure their home, that they haven't reached out to us yet, that we need to check. What can we get you? Can we get your claim started? Can we get you money to start just to get safe, right? All those kind of things. So data, I mean, any situation we have, pretty much any situation we have within the company, it's about the data, and you use that. So core, function of the insurance business, just in general, everything runs on that.
Wow. That's really interesting. Brad, I think that the insurance industry, maybe more so than other industries, has this challenge, this dichotomy where for a lot of us, there's customers on the other end of that data, but it can be a bit more abstract. The customers are maybe buying products on an e-commerce site, or it could be a B2B service that we're providing. Insurance, though, hits personally. pretty much all of us are customers of the insurance industry. And a lot of times when we hear about the insurance industry, there's been a disaster. There's been someone who maybe hasn't gotten the payout that they were hoping for. Many of us have families in places like Florida with the hurricanes or California with the wildfires. As someone who works in insurance, how do you sort of process the people behind the data in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in that when you're looking at policy numbers or IDs or values like that or coverages and things. Fortunately, as part of the data governance program, when I was working on putting that together, we did our identity resolution system or MDM system. And in that, I mean, that's really the core of that is take in information about people and figure out which ones are the same person. So, hey, they have this policy for their car and this for their home. Is it the same person? We want to know so we can link things together. So that really gave me a lot of opportunity to dig in and look at not just the people data themselves, but what is it that helps me identify a person? What are their characteristics? And then obviously there's so many implications on that. You have to protect people's data from leaks. You don't want to store your PII, your personally identifiable information. I mean, there's so many things you have to do to think about that, because the impact of that is that, okay, if we leak out this person's information, maybe their address or their phone or their driver's license number, they potentially have an impact in the real world, let alone the obviously the regulatory impact that the company would suffer. But it's sometimes challenging to, or not necessarily challenging, but it's not always a conscious thing to think about, hey, these are real people, because oftentimes it's working with the data, but it pops up enough here and there. And especially when it's like, okay, we want this data to do this certain thing. Is that doing the right thing? Or we don't want to use AI to make decisions based on maybe data that's not quite great, or the AI models that aren't great, that are again impact people in the real world. So those kinds of things are really important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I love that. I appreciate you sharing that, Brad. I'd love to jump into some of the fun technical things that you've been working on. One of the things that intrigued me with your experience, Brad, is what you're doing with DBT Mesh at Mercury Insurance. You guys are enabling business embedded analytics teams to kind of manage their own data needs. This feels on the cutting edge. Could you dig into that? How did the need surface itself, and how did DBT Mesh present as a solution for you guys?
The need was more about maybe another origin story, a bit about the data analytics engineering team that I'm on, this core team. When that was started, it sort of evolved into that. But at the same time, some of our other business departments also started to spin up their own analytics teams. So we were under our product management team to start with. Now we're in the enterprise data science office. And then we have in our underwriting, who deals with policy stuff, we have a team there. Our sales has a team. Our claims has a team, so we had all of these teams. And at first, people were just building within our one main project. We call it DBT main, but that there's certain things that you want to do there. And so with the exposure to or learning about DBT Mesh, we figured out we can create a separate DBT project. So sales can have a DBT project, underwriting can have a DBT project. And then by using Mesh, anything that's reusable, like all of our staging layer, if there's a source in Redshift and we need to put that in DBT as a staging model, first step, that goes in our main project. But then because it's Mesh, now if sales needs to reference that model, they don't build it in sales and then underwriting with the same model has to build it over there. You build it in the center and everybody can reach it. So doing that helped us realize, you can sort of build and own your own process within that. And it enables us to not so much be a bottleneck in the central team. So, and it lets us meet the users really where their skill levels are. So we have one team that basically owns their project and repo. They do most of their pull requests, reviews, and approvals themselves. They really only need us to schedule jobs and make changes like that, and for really complex logic and things. And then there are other teams where they're still working on that skill level. So they're able to develop and build, but then they rely on us to help do pull requests, reviews, make sure things are good, manage the merging, help them with advanced topics. So it gives us that flexibility. There's teams coming on that are like, oh, I'm interested in using DBT. Great. We're working on putting together some enablement sessions so we can have those out there, like office hours or specific training. Hey, you've not used DBT before, but you know SQL. Great. Let's get in here. That's really the requirement. If you know SQL, you can use DBT and we'll help you get there. And then these teams are finding ways to then provide value directly to their verticals and not having to wait for us else to do something and deliver it for them. So it's empowering to be on a team like that. I think you get to own what you're doing.
Yeah, man, that's some good stuff right there. Man, there's nothing like finding your sweet spot, finding the area that gives you energy, right? We talked a little bit before the recording, Brad and I did, about being introverts in an extroverted world. And I think the same goes or similar can go for you, almost your data personality. Being able to find that lane, whether you're an analytics engineer, a data analyst, and then being able to sort of go deep and just nerd out. I'm actually curious, Brad, how you settled on data engineering as the area that gives you energy, that gives you joy. Why are you not a data analyst, a data scientist? Why data engineering?
Yeah, I think if you think about, like, let's say a Venn diagram of your data engineers, your analytics, your engineers, and your introverts, it's very nearly a circle. So for me, that's perfect. I'm very much an introvert. Quiet, alone time is really what I need, not so much in like the big, loud, noisy rooms with lots of people. So I still have to talk to people, obviously, but I get a lot of leeway to go gather requirements, figure out what they want, and then apply what I know about our data and best practices and build and deliver things in my own way. I get to like focus in, head down, just work on something and get it to go. Whereas when I was a business systems analyst on our business intelligence team, you talk with the customers to find out, our business customers, find out what they need, in their reports and dashboards, then figure out how to build that, what needs to get built, work with the developers. It's a lot of meetings, phone calls, face to face when we were in person. So you had to be good at those kind of interactions, which I could do, but it could be draining at times, again, being introverted. And then I think at data scientists, they need to know at least a little bit about how to do everything data related. In some cases, if you're on a smaller team, they'll have to prepare the data sources, transformations, build and create, models, interpret results, monitor that, all that stuff, right? They wear a lot of hats. They do that very well. I'm not really suited for that kind of work. I'd get easily distracted, and there's levels of like advanced math I think you need in a lot of statistical modeling. It's just kind of beyond me where I'm at.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really good. And I love the self-awareness. I learned, it took me longer maybe than most, but there's something to be said for like self-acceptance, like just accepting the areas that don't give you energy and finding the ones that give you strength. I mean, again, for those of us who grew up reading comic books, Brad and I were nerding out about the Daredevil Marvel TV series the other day, for example. Just sort of knowing what your niche is and knowing what you're good at allows you to really go deep and show up to work every day giving your best self. So with that being said, Brad, what does your team, your data team look like? And what does your day-to-day work look like?
Yeah. So the team that I'm working on is our core analytics engineering team. So there's 5 or 6 of us. We've had a couple of people leaving and hiring in. So we're at about 6 people. And what we do day to day, like I'm going to give this from my point of view, which is a little bit more experienced, senior role, not a people leader anymore here, but, not a ton of time for us, at least spent on maintenance kind of processes, on days without job failures. Obviously we don't need to do that. So when we need to configure something, set up a new job, schedule change, that kind of stuff, we have each of us, there's 5 of us who each have a day where we review the pull requests, and that's across all of our mesh repos. So, Friday's my day, Monday's someone else, Wednesday. So I'll do that in terms of like my weekly work. Most of what I do, probably 80-90% of the time, is really, working on some bigger projects, building out new features, new pipelines, new tables, whatever. So I'll spend a lot of my time planning, designing, constructing, testing, getting feedback. And then obviously when there's an issue that comes in, you got to troubleshoot that. And that varies just by demand of how much we have. We have a fairly robust CI/CD pipeline configured. So when we tend to see data failure or failures in that, it's more often due to like upstream data issues rather than something we built incorrectly and it failed. In those cases, then we're coordinating with those upstream teams, getting fixes implemented. And then maybe at most we're rerunning a jobs or just waiting for it to run tomorrow if it's not critical. It's rare that we have to go in and make a quick fix to our code to solve a problem right away. But again, kind of referring back to that CI/CD pipeline, it's pretty easy that we can do that when it's necessary. So that's what I would say I work on like most days.
That's nice. There's a couple of things that I want to highlight there that I really enjoyed. The fact that your team, it just maybe coincidentally happens to be at the size where you can divvy up monitoring pull requests on a daily basis. So I love that, being able to batch. Like, you're not every day having to wonder, am I doing pull requests today or not? I like that system. And then the fact that your CI/CD pipeline is robust sort of narrows down where the failures could potentially be coming from. Maybe we could double click on that a little bit for those of us who aren't yet at the level of data maturity to have those robust CI/CD pipelines. Did you all always have such a solid CI/CD framework and setup in place?
I think so. I wasn't there at the beginning of this team, which formed, I'll say 2023 early-ish. I came in later last year when I really, was like full-time on this work. But in the beginning, there wasn't so much of that, but I know it was something we wanted to do, or the team wanted to do from early on, to put that together. So I think we didn't necessarily struggle with it too much as we were building from scratch, because you start with a few models here and there, so it's very easy to manage. But I've been to with the team. Most of the people from the team have been to Coalesce the last couple of years, and there's always some presentation that's really, I mean, there's always several, but some that are really core. You take away like, oh, we need to do this, and we need to do this like yesterday. And CI/CD is one of those things. They talk about how you can do that. So for us, the core things we do is that when you create a pull request and it goes to GitHub, we have linters running on that. So SQL Fluff and for SQL files, and Prettier for YAML files. And the linter is going to go in and make sure you're coding with best practices. So are you doing leading or trailing commas? Are your spaces and your line breaks correct? Like, it's a very formatting thing. But for us, that code consistency is really key, because if you always know the style of the code, then if I need to look at that model or that one, or this one I worked on 2 years ago and don't remember, or when new people come in, like, it's all very consistent. So we have those being enforced, and the check runs when you create the pull request. And if it fails on one of those, it'll fix some things that it can. But if it fails, like, hey, you've done this against best practice, you need to remove that or redo that, the GitHub won't let you approve and merge it until you fix that. So we have those kind of things. What we're working on and just getting ready to publish, that's been really asked for, and I think absolutely necessary, and is kind of a miss on our part, is standards, putting standards, SQL standards, YAML standards, data type, all these things. So putting those documentations together and letting people know what to expect, because it can be hard to create a pull request, send it in, and then you just randomly start getting feedback and like, well, I didn't know that that's the way you do things. So part of that is, our enablement sessions, are putting together the standards, getting the information out there and available for people. So the code going in with our reviews is high quality. It's been looked at. We have automated checks and fixes, and then we have standards to hold people to. And you get some good back and forth. Like, it's a great way to learn. I submit something and somebody asks, hey, why didn't you use, this, I'll give you an example in Redshift. Why don't you use the qualify command here? Because instead I was creating a row number, and then in the next CTE, I'm selecting that where row equals 1. And hey, why didn't you use this? And well, the easy answer is that I had no idea that command existed. And so now I learned something new and get to use that in my thing. So I think through that process, we're just learning and helping everybody. Everybody's helping each other to get better at what you're doing. And then in the end, the checks and all that helps you put through high quality, consistent code.
My gosh, this is beautiful. This is good stuff, man. This is exciting. It's got to be fun working on your data team. I am interested in what role artificial intelligence might be starting to play, maybe at an industry level, and then specifically at Mercury. And what concerns might you have about AI?
We have a research and innovation team that's independent from the data office that I report to, that has started experimenting with ways to use AI over the last few years. There's people all over the company asking, when can we have something with AI, even if they don't quite know what or why? It's a buzzword, and it gets in people's heads, and they want to know, what can we do to use that? So our data science teams are looking at ways to use AI to help leadership identify places where they can focus, where there's issues. Maybe if a KPI is not performing like we thought, can we have AI models that'll look at the underlying data, the reporting, and highlight, correlated or contributing factors that might be actionable, and then leadership can take those and look through. So those kind of things. For me personally, in the work that I do, I'm more excited about the ways that AI can speed up my workflows, code generation, documentation, that kind of stuff, and less so for me about like letting AI make decisions or focus our attention, based on what it can figure out. I think, our company, the industry, every company needs to use AI responsibly, because like we were talking about earlier, there's always the potential to impact the lives of real people in the real world, like our customers. As an insurance company, like, we're acutely aware of how and when it's appropriate, and especially when it's not appropriate to use AI. We won't take important decisions out of the hands of trained, like, experienced people. You don't want to do that. We just want AI to work to help those people's jobs be easier, to make them, it easier for them to do those jobs. But I think at this point right now, you really can't just ignore AI, because while you're doing that and just sitting here waiting and watching or not doing it, somebody else is going to embrace it and going to develop a competitive advantage that's over you. So you have to get in there and figure out responsible ways to use it. I think it's too risky at this point to not do it.
Wow. Yeah. Wise words. Wise words. And AI is like the wild, wild west right now. There's so many different ways. It's pretty fragmented for now. So I'm always intrigued to hear how people are thinking about it. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Having said that, you shared some wonderful stories about your pipelines, your workflows, the robust CI/CD processes. You guys are, your system is humming. But we want to hear some data disasters, Brad. Not everything could be all sunshine and rainbows. Could you share with us maybe, some data disasters or mistakes or challenges that you've experienced personally in the past?
Yeah, one of the biggest one that comes to mind. So shortly after I joined full time into the analytics engineering team, when my transition was done, our two top analytics engineers left the company, like one right after the other. And I say the top, like the ones that had been there the longest and really had set up and built things together. So we kind of immediately went into keep the lights on mode for a little while. It was easy enough to do because they set things up in a really robust way. So it's not like everything started falling apart, the moment they left. But then a request comes in, hey, we want to create a new DBT project to add to our mesh setup because there's another team that we want to do that for. None of us that were left had ever created or configured a new DBT project. So there's lots we need to do. You create the new DBT project, set that up, create the GitHub repo and configure that, set up the linters, the CI/CD checks. Like there's so much to do, and we didn't have instructions or anything on how to do that. So I, just like had to dive in and do it the old fashioned way. So using DBT's documentation, referencing the other mesh projects that we had, I just went step by step through everything. Basically copied settings and configs from a current DBT project and GitHub repo into the new one, and go through, every option, every setting, make sure I have them all exactly the same. It was tedious, but eventually, like with some trial and error, I was able to get the new project set up and configured. That took like a week and a half-ish, but in the end, it worked and we got that set up and running. I did have the foresight to document that process as I went through it. So now we have a step-by-step guide that we can use that. And I've already used it once more. We had another request come in and that one only took about a day to do. So it was a much bigger improvement. And then of course I found, here's the places where I misspoke or copied the wrong screenshot or something, was able to shore that up. But yeah, that was a big challenge. And it was kind of scary. You go back to that like imposter syndrome. This is on my shoulders. Do I even know how to do this? What am I going to mess up? What am I going to break? But you work through it and knock on wood, so far, so good. No issues.
That's great. That's a really good one. I appreciate you sharing that story. And that's very grounding for a lot of us who are seeing some of the great things that you yourself and your team are doing. I'd be interested from an interview standpoint now. We're thinking about data engineers. Have you had the opportunity, Brad, to interview any data engineers coming in? And if so, we'd love to hear of like some worst interview experiences that we could learn from.
Yeah. Let me find that. Yeah. So I've had the opportunity to interview some people. A lot of times it's been more of, especially in this role and not so much as a leader, but it's more of a culture fit. Do we have people that are going to work well with us? They understand what we do, how we do it, and they want to work, with us. But I've done technical review as well, overview, checking what they know, checking their knowledge. And, I always feel bad when you get to the limit of someone's knowledge, because everybody has that. I have them too. But when you get to that limit, you start asking questions and they're not knowing the answers, and that limit's lower than what they need for the role. That's, I always feel bad because I want everyone to succeed. And so it never feels great when you see someone start to struggle in that context. And we both realize like, where the gaps are and it's maybe not quite. Turning that onto myself, I'll give you one scenario. So when I was first getting interested in doing more data work, I interviewed for a data analyst position. Very early in the interview process, it became apparent to them and to me that the experience I had with using a visual tool like DB Visualizer and just sort of setting filters on a table and going like that's how I got data. That's not really what they were looking for. They needed someone who could like actually write SQL. So did not get that position.
That's tough. It's tough to come to that type of realization, especially real time in an interview. At the same time, it's that feedback is like data. One of the things, and who knows, maybe this fits into some of your experience with data governance. A lot of times we as individuals want the data to say a certain thing. In an interview, you want the feedback from the interviewer to be all positive. You want it to be telling you, yes, yes, Brad, you're on the right track. Keep going. You're right there. But sometimes that's not the reality. And is it better for us to get accurate data that lets us course correct, or faulty data that tells us what we want to hear and leads us to, walk off a cliff 6 months from now?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one, constructive feedback, constructive criticism. There shouldn't be any hard feelings about that. If I have a gap or I don't know something, tell me that and I'll learn it or not, or find someone who does. But yeah, definitely. I mean, and that runs into everything, right? You want accurate data. You don't want it quick and maybe not as thoroughly checked over, or maybe you do, but you understand that, there's, I think, you can put conditions on that when you're thinking about it in terms of a data. But yeah, for personal growth, yeah, if you're not, nobody's telling you what your gap is, then how do you know? You just kind of have to guess or make assumptions. So that kind of feedback communication is core to helping you grow and learn and succeed.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Brad, you're a fellow introvert. Sometimes people, by the way, I should add, sometimes people don't believe that I'm an introvert. I did grow up a very, very shy kid with lots of social anxiety. Shyness and introversion often go hand in hand, but they're not necessarily the same thing, just for the benefit of the people watching. Introversion. Let me actually ask Brad. Brad, how would you, being an introvert, how would you describe introversion?
Yeah, there's a book that I love. We talked about it earlier by Susan Cain. It's called Quiet. And she really goes in to describe that one of the differences between introverts and extroverts is how you recharge your batteries, yourself. And an introvert gets their batteries drained by being in a social situation, talking to a lot of people, a loud room, an overly stimulating, like those kind of things. You just drain. And in order to reset and recharge and refill your batteries, you need quiet time, alone time, dark room, whatever that looks like. And an extrovert is the exact opposite.
Yes.
So an extrovert will go into a room with lots of people and have conversations and there's loud music or there's lights, whatever, like that sort of energizes and gets them going. And then when they're sitting down doing their work on their own and they're not around other people, it's the opposite. You drain from that. So I think it's important for me to think about and understand that, not only for myself, but for the people I work with. And I think it's equally or maybe even more important if you're a people leader, to start to understand what, the people you're leading, are they introverts, are they extroverts, are they, ambiverts? They can do both, they can switch back and forth, and meeting people where they are. I think that helps you be more effective. If you understand, hey, not everybody's going to want to do that team building exercise where you all get in a room and tell stories to each other or something. Like that may work for some people, but not for everyone. And so some people may not like to be specifically called out, like, hey, look at, John over here did this great project and everybody applaud him for 5 minutes. And John's over there like, can I just go away? So I think it's really helpful to know the people that you're working with, and especially that are working for you, to be able to help meet them where they are.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, Brad. And I think you actually had an instance of being able to share some of this insight with your organization and getting them to be maybe more sensitive to the differences between extroverts and introverts in the workplace.
Yeah, we had an all hands on site team, and one of the presentations that we put together, I suggested the topic of that was introverts and extroverts. And I think it was really helpful, especially again for the leaders, to think about that and really picture, because if you're an extrovert, you're not likely to think about other people not being that. That's just the way, it's an extrovert world and that's how things are. And so it's not necessarily a conscious decision. So putting that in front of people, like, look, maybe you are an extrovert, but they're introverts too, and they approach the world differently, and you'll people have different needs. So I think it was really good to be able to share that with the team and then have people take that back and sort of start to internalize, okay, let me find out which of my team members are introverts and extroverts and how I handle the interactions with them and what they sort of need to succeed or be happy or healthy or just, content in their life is good.
Yeah, this is so good because I love to ask people how they handle challenges like context switching in their work or decision fatigue versus being able to find flow in their day-to-day work. And I think us introverts love that opportunity to get into that dark room, work on a juicy, meaty problem and just like nerd out on it for a little bit and then come up for air and socialize what we've worked on, get input and so on. It can be difficult at times to switch styles and work in more of an extrovert type style where people are like maybe stopping by the office, chatting it up, shooting the breeze while you're in the middle of solving problems?
Yeah, that's funny. I wanted for a very long time to have, when we were in the office, my own office rather than a cubicle where I'm hearing and sitting next to people. And then, I went into the data governance management, and they were like, okay, we're going to build these offices out of this room here. And then, COVID hit, we all went to work from home. So now I have this office, which is the spare bedroom in my house. So finally got that, which is good. Going back to that sort of the topic here, I think out of necessity, I became a bit of a pro at context switching, because I don't think there's ever a role, at least not one that I've had, where you can always just work on one thing at a time. I mentioned before, like I had a bit of a prolonged transition between data governance to analytics engineering. And so there would be days where there's like several hours of governance meetings, and then there's a half-hour spot here and maybe one there where I could switch and do the DBT work. It's very draining, and sometimes it's not even worth it, to get started on a particular day. It's like, okay, I've got 30 minutes, but most of that time is just remembering where I was before. That's that switching back and forth. The best tool I had to combat that during the time was block off my calendar in advance and then hold the boundary. Very important that you do that, so that I knew I could dedicate, a couple of hours or a morning to one task or a couple of things. But to dabble back and forth all day, every day, it would have just been unsustainable. So that's a tool that I use to help limit the switching that has to take place and give yourself more
That's
time,
super
dedicated
smart.
time.
I love that. Yeah, that's super smart. I love that. I love that. With that being said, Brad, when you do get an opportunity to get into flow and nerd out and work on big meaty projects, could you share maybe the story of a project you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so we use a service vendor, LexisNexis, to get information about prior insurance coverage potential customers. From 2012 to early last year, all the data came in one format. So it's fixed length flat files. And then last year they switched to XML format. Okay, no problem. We're getting that. But we had all those files, both styles, just sitting in S3 buckets and waiting for somebody to go in and use that. But using that data is tough in that form. We had our data engineering team use Athena to expose that data into Redshift through external tables. So now you've got a way to at least look at that and do that within SQL. But the tables, they're very flat tables, very denormalized, lots of not very easy to get in and just use it in that format. I had the challenge of creating models to really simplify access to all that data, do that in a unified way. Basically, then I had to do, two completely separate analyses on those to understand the source format, the structure, the valid values, how things put together, the relationships between the different levels of data. And then a third analysis at the end of that to rationalize data between those two. So that was a long process. I uncovered some data issues in the way the flat files had been processed incorrectly, because they didn't just drop raw flat files into S3 and expose them, because it wouldn't work that way. So they converted them to JSON and sitting them in there. But anyway, so the parsing had some issues, but nobody had uncovered that because there hadn't been a way to really look at the data holistically yet. So that was part of the process as well. So, learning two different sets of source data, building two data pipelines, mashing those both together while finding issues, trying to correct for that, and getting help and input where I could from the people who knew what they were expecting out of the data. Took a long time, but in the end, it was worth it. The insights that historical data set brings, that you can look at, okay, people who had this sort of characteristics, how do they perform and as customers? There are a lot of people smarter than I putting that to good use right now in research and building models for those. That was a great one. It's a fun one. And I still get questions and support, that data set today.
That's wild. That's wild. That was what, like 12 years worth of data that you're now creating insights and research from for other parts of the business. Phenomenal. With that in mind, I'm curious as to how you're actually measuring the impact of your work on the business. This is a notoriously difficult challenge for data professionals. What's the thing about the cobbler's children having no shoes? How do we measure the business impact of our data work?
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's a classic problem to try and quantify that. I think one of the perks of me now being an individual contributor again, instead of a manager, is that it's someone else's job. So I don't have to figure that out. But, for me, I think it becomes evident, like when you're given large and more visible projects, you get asked to present about certain work, you're trusted to onboard new people, mentor new hires. You tend to get a sense of how others see your contributions, I think, by how much more they want from you, and they want you to continue working on those things.
That's good. That's good. Brad, what does success look like to you?
I think, building on that last answer a bit, when I'm being asked to do more things, bigger things, broader things, when I'm being trusted to deliver that's success to me. Like, basically don't talk to me unless I did something bad. And if that's how it's going, I think that's a success, at least for me.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Brad, folks, we got to get Brad out of here. He's been really generous with his time, but I do want to ask a couple more questions because Brad has such a unique background and career trajectory. First, Brad, have there been any key mentors or influences on this journey that you'd like to shout out publicly? And if so, what did you even learn from them?
It's actually hard to narrow that down. I've been incredibly fortunate to have a lot of great leaders in almost every role I've been in, specifically here at the company. The leaders who stand out for me are the ones who, prepared me for the job, support me when I need them to, and demonstrated why I could trust them. I've talked about that trusting relationship a lot. Nobody likes to work for a leader where you feel unsafe, especially when it's like this is your livelihood in their hands. What I learned from that when I was managing a team of people, I always tried to emulate that. It's about what you can do to help your people succeed. It's not what you need to do to raise yourself up and leave them behind. I think that's probably the core thing that I learned.
Wow, that is powerful. That is powerful. I want to ask one more question. You've taken us on a journey today. This has been like like an odyssey. The ups, the downs, the highs, the lows. I laughed, I cried. But as we close, we got to give people some hopium. Give them some hope. We want some encouragement for people who are trying to climb the ladder in their data career. What advice would you give, Brad, for someone who's trying to transition maybe from entry level to mid level, or even from mid level to higher ranks? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think if I'm giving that advice, first I'll say protect your work-life balance. A lot of organizations say they want you to have a good work-life balance, but even in the ones that embody that, you often have to hold that boundary yourself. Nobody's likely to complain if you're overcommitting or delivering too much work, and especially if you aren't the one complaining about it. So you have to protect that. I would say beyond that, after that, looking to advance in your data career, get curious about what it is you'd like to pursue. Be willing to learn new things, try things, ask questions, and look for the people who treat you well, especially the leaders. They're going to be your advocates to help you find what makes you happy at work. And then, you got to look at what your skill level is, where you want to go. So it's really hard to move within an organization from, maybe a somewhat experienced level into an entry role level somewhere else where they're going to have different skill set. Like it's hard to do that. So find the people that are doing that work that you want to do, figure out what they need to do, how you can get there. People are really passionate about that work. They're going to love to share that with you and talk to you and explain to you about what they're doing and help you get to that point. And then, lastly, I think hopefully you have the leaders that are willing to help you incorporate some of those things into your work or look for opportunities, and that they'd rather find ways for you to stay happy or be happy with your work than risk you leaving to go somewhere else looking for those kind of opportunities.
Wise words, folks. We've been talking to Brad Cronkrite, the lead data analytics engineer at Mercury Insurance Company. Started out with COBOL. Now we're here. Come on, people. We're doing big things. Brad, you might see Brad at Coalesce this year. He's been the past couple of years. I don't know if I'll have the privilege of running into him this year. I certainly hope that I do. It would be a great pleasure. Brad, I got to get back into my Marvel TV shows now because you've just out-nerded me on some of these shows. So I got to get back to brass tacks here. But I really enjoyed this conversation. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with Brad as much as I have. Brad Cronkrite, thank you.
Thank you so much, Balaji. Great to see you. And I'll see you at Coalesce. I'll find you.
Woohoo! All right. We're hanging out. Okay, folks. Hopefully we'll get to see you at Coalesce as well this year in Vegas. Until then, we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.